Hello, and welcome to the spooky season. Black Cat, terrifying. And I know the title says horror, but I'm a spooky boy, not a scary boy. I'm not the biggest horror aficionado to begin with. I am seldom in the mood to be scared. I enjoy being spooked. I like the ghosts and the ghoulies and the heebie-jeebies. I don't like the killer clown stabbing me to death mercilessly and jumping at the screen and making me piss my pants. So that gives you an idea. If you're coming in here being like, I want the scariest, absolutely not. You're getting the gothic kind of, ooh, it's nice to have a storm outside and read while the rain hits against the window and there's candles on, but there's actually nothing to fear at all. That's my vibe. I have a list here of my favourite horror, gothic kind of books that I also have a kind of little bit at the end that goes into more literary horror, something that's not really, some of it's more like body horror, some of it's more like, it's not true what I would consider like just horror, it's a bit more cross-genre, but I wanted to include them because they're very good books. The thing you'll notice is that if you're a horror fan, you're not going to be surprised by anything in here. You're not going to be like, whoa, that's a deep cut. You'll be like, oh, these are the ones that everyone has read. So I will give a warning to those who are like horror veterans. You're not getting anything new here. But for those who are trying horror, dabbling their toes, then this is, I think, a pretty good list of straight bangers, mostly classics that kind of, I don't know, for horror, for me, I love a good classic, especially gothic, as I said, it just provides the mood perfectly. The first one on the list is one of my favourite books of 2025 so far that I've read, and that is The Exorcist by William Peter Blattey. Something that I was sure I would love, but I didn't expect to overwhelmingly fall in love with the book. I'm sure everyone is aware of at least the title, The Exorcist, one of the most famous films ever made, absolute banger of a story. I'll give a very basic premise purely because people know what the book's about. Regan is a young girl who is possessed by a demon, and we follow Regan's mother as she is trying to understand what the fuck is happening to her child, why this is happening, and the best thing about the book is that it goes through a rational person's thought process to what's happening. You know, she goes to the doctors, she goes to therapists, she goes to all of the what we would consider the rational processes of dealing with a child that seems that they are disturbed or have some kind of mental health crisis occurring. As a result, you find yourself, you experience their relationship before everything goes on, and so you are connected to them as a mother and daughter relationship, and when that change occurs, it feels so much more personal and close to home because it's like you're watching a neighbour trying to deal with something like this, and you're watching her just mentally collapse as she watches her child completely change character overnight. William Peter Blattey is such a fantastic character writer in this book. The characters just feel so real. The whole image comes to life so perfectly. There's like the social commentary around priests and the relationship between them. We have a policeman who is like this fantastic character who it goes into the process of how he looks to get information out of people, the way he puts his persona forward for people to perceive them so he can get information out of them. I think it's just an incredibly clever book, the incredibly clever character writing. Truly has some horrific moments inside of it. Obviously, this is a young girl that's being possessed by this timeless, ageless demon of evil. And so the book is not about Regan being possessed. It is about this demon looking to destroy innocence, looking to destroy the concept of innocence for these adults, provide a helplessness as they watch the innocents die in front of them. And so it's a very emotionally moving book, horrific in terms of the things that happen. A lot of trigger warnings for disturbing scenes with a child, but I think he does it in a way that is never gratuitous. It's never about the things that are happening. It is about the effects on the audience and the characters as a result that are witnessing the things that are happening. So, yeah, The Exorcist is an absolute goldie of a book. The writing is incredibly fast-paced, whilst being character-focused. His dialogue is very snappy, very to the point. He also has, the same as the next author I'm going to mention, has a rhythm to his writing. It's kind of this sense of momentum you get, and it builds up the tension and relieves it based on the structure of the writing, the length of the sentences, the length of the paragraphs. It ramps up, and you don't even realise it until you're suddenly, like, you're breathing heavily, you're breathing fast as you're kind of rushing through it. That holds on to book 2, which is, in my opinion, the best Stephen King book I've read to date, which is The Shining. There are other banger Stephen King books, Salem's Lot, Pet Sematary, Misery, etc., all very good. The reason I picked The Shining is because The Shining has a great ending, which I cannot say for a lot of the other Stephen King books I've read. I hate a lot of Stephen King endings. Very famous for that being the case with his writing. But The Shining was the one where I finished it and I was like, that was wall-to-wall a banger. If you've watched the film before, whereas The Exorcist is pretty close to the film from my understanding, The Shining varies wildly from the film adaptation, where The Shining is much more a descent into madness, and it's in my opinion a much more nuanced piece, because rather than when you watch the film, Jack Torrance is already nuts, like Jack Nicholson's already off the bend, whereas in this it is this kind of regression into alcoholism and violence, and it becomes a much more emotional piece as a result, because you're watching this wife and child deal with the monster that their husband is becoming. And also it's an interesting piece because you feel sympathy for Jack, because whereas in the book, with all Stephen King books, there's a sense of this overwhelming evil existing either inside of places or like monsters, etc. It is this kind of manifest evil that occurs. The hotel itself is evil, and he is susceptible to the evil that permeates it. And so you've kind of got this jostling, this battle between good and evil, between him wanting to care for and look after his family, and also this need to hurt them, that is, I think, very true to life in terms of abusive relationships, with the idea of this broken mindset, this idea that you are simultaneously protective and also the abuser at the same time. I think from the perspective of the abuser, that is often the mindset they have, this dual cognitive dissonance, and I think The Shining does that true to life by virtue of being fictional fantasy, if you make sense. The metaphor itself is true to life. Once again, everyone knows what The Shining is. Jack Torrance and his family are going to the Overlook Hotel to look after it over the winter. They get snowed in and things go tits up, as it's known as. The next one is Something Wicked This Way Comes by Ray Bradbury. Atmosphere manifest. Like, the idea of these two boys going to the local kind of carnival show, and it's just full of evil shit. And the writing is like hypnotic, kind of poetic, a lot of metaphor heaviness, imagery heaviness. Same as Fahrenheit 451, he takes 3 pages to describe something because he's using these metaphors to kind of create the image of something. It's the same, not to the same degree here, but it is still kind of abstract in its descriptions at points. It creates this feeling of uneasiness, unreality, that kind of transports you into being a child experiencing just a fucked up carnival show. And I think it's incredibly relatable to... I remember going to a carnival with my aunt and my cousin when I was a kid, and I'd never really spent time with them ever. It was the first time we were really going together. I felt vulnerable, and then we're going to where there's a bunch of clowns and shit and fire and like all this crazy stuff, and I was like, this is terrifying, and but also wondrous, and I think that's what this book catches. They are kind of hypnotized by the evil on show, and there's a particular scene that sticks out in my mind, which is to do with a kind of merry-go-round, like a teacups type thing, but I think it's a merry-go-round, if I remember. And it's just this description of something happening there, and they're watching it, and it's just completely spellbinding, in my opinion, in terms of the imagery that's brought to mind, and the kind of unveiling of what the characters are and who they are, and it just... this is a perfect kind of Halloween time read, because you've got the iconography, you've got the carnival tent, and you've got the clowns and all this kind of thing, the showman, and it kind of just it evokes that kind of feeling so well. The next two are hardly surprising in any way, but they are bangers, and two epistolary novels. We've got Dracula, firstly. Dracula is a banger, in my opinion. I love it. I know some people think it's boring or whatever. I don't agree the slightest. Dracula's awesome. From Jonathan Harker in Dracula's Castle to my favourite part of the book is where, like, early on, after after Harker's at the castle, where the ship is coming into Whitby docks, and it's just a description of like this foggy, stormy night, and through this port comes a ship that has no one on it, and the only person is the captain, who is tied to the steering wheel with like a cross like on his chest, and he's like dead, tied to this, and like a dog jumps off, and you're just like, what the fuck happened here? For those that don't know, I used to vacation to Whitby a lot when I was a kid. We would always go visit and walk up the Abbey, so I know I can visualize every bit of the Whitby part of this book, and I just love reading it, and it just evokes that. It just completely brings to life that feeling of sitting up on the Abbey, looking over the sea, and you can see where it would have come in, and it's just gives you the heebie-jeebies again. Otherwise, I think Dracula is a fantastic book. I read it I read it before I went to university, and then I reread it for a Gothic course, and the analysis that we went through around Dracula was just fascinating. The idea of it being this reverse immigration, a reverse invasion story. The idea that the British Empire was at such a paramount height at the time that there was this kind of cultural fear of the idea of like, well, what if it happened back to us? And with the rise of the Russian Empire at the time, you've got this idea of an Eastern European supernatural entity entering the UK and wreaking havoc and destroying the British nature of the Isles, if you get what I mean. And so it's very interesting to analyse the book from that perspective. And then also with the idea of like the new woman, which Bram Stoker was writing about, because the first time I read it, I loved Mina Harker. I think she's still a fantastic character. But when you read about why Bram Stoker may have been writing Mina Harker the way he did, it makes it a lot less like feminist coded, and it makes it much more kind of like women should be they should be like working to help support men, and shouldn't be promiscuous, and they should be kind of buttoned up, just doing their job and going home and that kind of thing. So it's simultaneously I love Mina Harker as just this railing figure of like, no, you should listen to me. I know what the fuck I'm talking about right now. I'm the only one who's put the effort in to actually put all the pieces together, and I'm the one that's central to this. But also, it's not necessarily this blazing figure of righteous new feminism that I was kind of invoking the first time I read it. Very interesting. Finally, a true masterpiece. Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. It's funny because I call it a masterpiece. Whenever I've read it 4 stars. I've rated it 4 stars. But it's one of those books that the reading experience is a 4-star, but now I think if I reread it, I would give it 5 stars because it is just a masterpiece. The book obviously is about, for everyone knows what Frankenstein is again, but it is about the Dr. Frankenstein creating a creature from body parts and reanimating it. And let's be real, I'm very excited for Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein. That's an important thing to stress. I am looking to see whether it's coming to any theatres near us because, goddamn, I want to watch it on the big screen, and I don't have Netflix. Frankenstein is a very interesting book because it does vary wildly between which edition you read, 1818 and 1831. 1818 is this kind of much more provocative, unrestrained read because she released it anonymously to begin with. But the 1831 is heavily edited by Percy Shelley and kind of changes some of the relationship dynamics, changes some of the views on kind of religion versus science. It's a little bit more restrained, honestly. So take that as you will. I think they're both great reads. It's actually interesting reading both and comparing them. But yeah, the best thing about Frankenstein for me is that it is a if you've never encountered it before, if you've only heard about the film and that kind of thing, then I think it's a great book to just read. Just don't listen to another word and just experience it, because I was so surprised the first time I read it through the perception of different characters, who I had sympathy for, who I didn't have sympathy for, the genuinely just the amount of nuance inside of the story, the way that you can understand and relate to every single character and also not agree with really any of them at some points, is just masterful storytelling. Mary Shelley is one of the greatest authors of all time, especially as an 18-year-old writing Frankenstein. Ridiculous. But yeah, that kind of segues out of the like horror into the more literary horror kind of vibes, the gothic kind of spookums. I've got 4 here. The first one is The Yellow Wallpaper. This is horrifying by virtue of its reality. The book is about this woman who is having bouts of melancholia and is kind of seen as being hysterical. And so she is locked up inside of a room with yellow wallpaper, and she just loses her fucking mind. It's this very short story of her just spiraling with being trapped in this place. Essentially, like, Charlotte Perkins Gilman is commentating on the fact that, and it is based on the fact that she experienced that as actual treatment, because that's what people did. They would be like, "You're sad? Go to the country and we'll lock you up for a while, and then we'll let you out when you stop saying you're upset anymore." And it was a genuine medical kind of treatment. And this book has it where her husband is simultaneously a doctor as well, and so there's just this oppressive sense of knowledge that this person seems to have, this idea of like, no, we're doing it for you, I am both doing this as your husband and as your doctor, I am doing this for your greater good. And it's this woman being like, no, like, I cannot stress to you how harmful this is. And this overwhelming societal patriarchal kind of slapping around that is just like, no, I'm doing this because you need it. And it's a truly terrible read, based on just the events of the book, but also just the fact that it was such a real treatment. Alongside that, I think The Picture of Dorian Gray is another great gothic book. This tragedy of a young man who is just a bit of an arsehole. I won't say too much, it's The Picture of Dorian Gray, but in my opinion, this book is perfection apart from one chapter, and it's one of the most dog shit chapters I've ever read in my entire life. It is just, the problem is it's a very long chapter, and it's essentially just describing a bunch of jewellery and stuff. I understand why it's there thematically for the book, but it takes up such a large portion and feels like it's overly complicated, like overly explaining the point, that I was like, okay, let's get out of here. I think if you skip that chapter or just like get the basic premise, then the rest of the book is pure perfection. And it is The Picture of Dorian Gray is this book of an artist finding his muse, creating this image. He just becomes this beauty-obsessed, narcissistic, literally Narcissus, falling in love with a mirror, and then the corruption of that mirror as a result. You can read the queerest reading of all time into this book. Obviously, Oscar Wilde was gay, was sentenced to prison because of his queerness. I think the kind of central characters are just, they're so fully realised. There's this kind of, I forget whether he's a major or something, but he's this guy who just says the worst things you've ever heard in your entire life. And he says it with such abandon and his pure chest that you're just like, Jesus Christ. And people kind of like simultaneously don't like him and like him because of the way he acts. And I think it's such a prevalent and true character. I think figures such as Tommy Robinson in the modern day are these people that, I think a lot of people who like Tommy Robinson, may I never meet one, are simultaneously aware of the crassness, and they're like, this isn't stuff that you should be saying, but let me he behind my hands because he's actually saying it. The audacity to say it. That's kind of the whole thing, and I think that character is just so true to life in that regard that I think they're extremely fascinating to read. The journey that Dorian Gray goes on, the life of the artist, I think it's just a fantastic read. And the last two are the kind of contemporary books. They are the most recent releases that I've got on this list. One is Tender as the Flesh, which is a world where like the business of meat is now in human production. Humans are cannibals, they are eating people, doing all this stuff. And essentially the main character is this man who he ends up in the owning of this kind of role with what's seen as like a cattle woman. And the story is just degrading and disgusting. It is horrific. I was vegetarian for like a year or two, like in my late teens into early 20s, and this was the book that brought me the closest to being like, I should do that again. Unfortunately, I am a piece of shit, and I don't think I can live without it. I was horrifically thin. I was unhealthy when I was doing that. Nevertheless, that's an aside. This book was so evocative and so disgusting that it did make me genuinely question the idea of like, damn. Because it is about the unethical nature of the way that we produce and slaughter animals. It is something that is just incredibly... If you just take the time to think about the fact that if you go to a restaurant and order a plate of wings, and you've got 12 wings, you know it's like 6 chickens had to die to give you that one plate of food. It is we are grossly exploitative in the way that we have food production. And finally, Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield, a book that I read and then Grace read, and now everyone messages Grace saying, I read this book because you recommended it, and I have to sit there seething. This is a really interesting book where it's this woman who, her wife is like a deep sea diver and was doing research and has returned from one of her missions heavily changed, and you've got this kind of dark, I'm trying to describe what the horror is like. It is this kind of, it is aquatic in nature. It is this kind of leviathan, creepy, eldritch, kind of unknowing what's happened. It's this idea of confusion and unsettling, the idea that a relationship has changed and you don't know why or how, and you don't know how to fix it. It's a truly unsettling read. The idea of the person that you love and know the most suddenly becoming a stranger, and how you deal with that. It's an unsettling read, to say the least. But they're all of my books. Let me know if there are any you would recommend me. Now, I will say I've read Shirley Jackson. I really enjoyed Shirley Jackson. She's just not quite with the books that are on this list. There are some that I really love, and as a result, you have to kind of make a distinction. But Shirley Jackson's really good. I've read her. There's a few other people, but let me know what you would recommend me. I am interested in reading more horror. I just read A Dowry of Blood, thanks to one of the Patreons picking it, which was a good book, but was not my favourite. Probably going to pick up The Impusium by Olga Tukzazuk that I've been looking forward to, and I've been kind of saving for the spooky season. But yes, let me know. Let me know if you've read any of these, whether you agree, disagree. And as always, links in the description to Discord, Patreon, Instagram, etc. But I hope you have a nice rest of your day. What's a scared face? Ah! Ah!
You better include that.